It is interesting in all these years of practicing and teaching in Buddhism and also in yogic practices, this priority of knowledge, of realization, of insight, of even not knowing, of beginner's mind, of a mind that is free, right? And yet, what I really deeply love about this passage, and here we're talking about Buddhist teachings that are very rare, that highlight, that lift up this quality of wonder. Why is this important? Why is wonder important? And, and maybe we'll check in about what this means for you. What is hard about having wonder, about opening ourselves to this enormous mystery with a capital M that is the entire cosmic process that we're a part of, not separate from. So, in asking myself this question of wonder, where did wonder go? Where did awe go? Usually, for me, interesting, I think this is an important question. For me, it has gone into the narrow channels of my egoic mind. It's this polarized, narrow view. This is not a criticism or a judgment, but it's something that is contracted down into sort of the uh, fundamental, the lowest common denominator, if you will, of my personal life, my life in general, and the narrative that comes out of it that is shaped and guided, directed, and channeled through ego, through this thing we call ego. The ego, if we think about ego, not from the Freudian, Jungian standpoint, even, but from the standpoint of the philosophies of ancient India, of yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, certainly, this notion of ego is that which sees itself as very separate over and against other things due to ignorance, due to pain, due to experiences, feeling apart from, separate from, alone, lonely, not in solitude, but lonely. And that is where the narrow channels, as I call them, so the narrow channels of the mind, of egoic mind, gets stuck. It's hard to see out of that encasement of self, of identification with narratives, with cynicism, with negation. And I think this happens on a couple of levels. First, um, there is the egoic fear. There is the fear of what is beyond my life that I cannot control. There is also the rational mind, the intellectual mind, that sometimes is a measure of control that we bring into uncertainty, into impermanence, or at least the experience of things being impermanent when it's frightening to think about. So we can't resolve this great mystery with a capital M with the intellect, with the rational mind. We can learn, we can have knowledge. In Buddhism, the three aspects of study, um, they involve self-study, they involve reading books, knowing and such. The second one is contemplation, where your knowing, your understanding deepens through practice. And then the third is realization through wisdom. And it's a process. And many of us, if we're faced with this mysterious, huge open question mark that almost negates the intellectual explanations of why things are the way they are, it's easy to sort of shut down this feeling of awe, of wonder, because things feel so difficult, so challenging. The world feels chaotic and negative. Maybe not for everyone all the time, of course, hopefully not, but in moments. And basically, our experience can shrink us down to this lowest common denominator, where we can't even perceive with our deeper intuitive sense, the quieter mind, and the heart opens to the great mystery that we are all a part of, the enormity of things. We might call this in Buddhism, in the Tantras, there's a term, Maha Shunya, Maha Shunyata, the great emptiness, the great void. Now, that can be grossly misunderstood. It doesn't mean nothingness. In fact, what we might better translate this Mahashunya as is the great opening, the great opening, the great opening of awareness, so that this limited, these narrow channels of mind, those are the things that dissolve. After all, they are quite impermanent already. They keep changing. They keep changing course in the brain, right? Our narratives change from one moment to the next. So here's the question: what part of us is blocking wonder, and what part of us sees it? What part of us is blocking wonderment or awe, and what part of us sees it? Why is this important? Why is this important? Because I think I often will talk about the sort of the priority of having a path means living your life under the great umbrella of a path, whether we call it a spiritual path or an existential path, a path of meaning, path of heart. It's important that we see that path not as just one small little chunk of life here, and job is here, family is here, right? Emotional life is here, relationship is here, or maybe one of those other things is the umbrella under which we live. And our existential life is one tiny piece. So my encouragement to everyone is always, let's turn that around a little bit and have this sort of our existential life, our practice, our path, whatever we call it, let's let that be the large umbrella under which we live our lives. And all these other pieces are sort of underneath this open thing. Or they are the spacious sky into which the forms appear. Rather, our path is the spacious sky into which all the other aspects appear as forms. Um, so, ego, this notion of ego, of separate, clinging selfhood, identification, this doesn't mean we jettison our past, we let go of our histories, which can be incredibly meaningful to who we are, but rather um, put them into perspective and realize that if we lose the sense of wonder, wonder not just at times it can be imbued with fear. Again, this is sort of this term that Rudolf Otto, the sort of great sociologist of religion, called a mysterium tremendum. This incredible mystery um, that we're a part of. We may not understand it, but when we can feel truly at home and inspired by the wonder, that's the key. And if we're not, then why not? What part of us, again, is blocking it, and what part of us knows that it is there? After all, we know we're not closed systems. We're not just like, it's just this shell of me, and then there is a vacuum between me and someone else. But there is so much more to this life than walking around as localized minds, right? So we may not understand it, but what if we could embrace that? Why is this important for the path of meditation practice? Well, it opens us to experiences we may not otherwise be open to. It opens us to experiences we may not otherwise be open to. And I promise you that those experiences are always going to be nourishing in some way. It doesn't mean that we don't have a moment where it's like, oh my gosh, what is happening to me here? That happens. That is part of the ego, though. That is fearing its own loss, fearing what it is we're really doing. It can't comprehend it. It's trying to catch up, as is the mind. So it needs to be an ally in the process. This term ego, we could spend so much time on it. The point here is rather than think that what I'm saying is to just sort of eradicate ego, I am saying turn it into an ally. Let ego in on the secret. Let it in to see that your deepest intention, ego can be a partner in that. After all, ego, as Leslie, my teacher, used to tell us, is really nothing more than a structure. It's a structure for consciousness. And the structure may be very opaque, it may be full of smoke or reflections and like a mirror, or it may be like clear glass. This is what happens as you progress in meditation and you're able to let go of all of the attachments and the identifications and such with self, with all the things we don't like about ourselves, all the things we want, but rather to allow ego to be an ally, to be part of the journey, part of the path, not in a self clinging, self cherishing way, but as part of the seeking, as part of the wonder. And ego does not like wonder at all, it fears it. And yet, it can also, I think, once it's comfortable with the feelings of knowing that we don't know, what we in Buddhism we call don't know mind or beginner's mind, that in that experience, wonder is possible because we are letting go of the need to know anything. We're deconstructing all the ways that we've configured the narrow channels of our stories. Sometimes they're big channels too, but it doesn't negate the stories. But what it does do is it helps us to uncover a bit more this feeling that we are deeply a part of that which is beyond us. And there's no need to fear it. Promise you. Yeah. So we can get fixated on the goal of meditation. You know, Marty and Lair Short, they use the word awakening in here. And we may not fully get what on earth that means. It's a map. Certainly, that word is a map that our practice is, in fact, leading us somewhere. And we may not know what it is. We may know, we may have teachers who explain what is awakening to us, but it's really just a map. We don't want to get fixated on the goal, but rather allow this awe, this wonderment to open the path, almost clear the path ahead of us so that we can keep going and not get stuck in the small mind. Some teachers will, in fact, um, tell us that what we're actually wanting to encounter is about the most ordinary experience you can have. Your mind is ordinary. Enlightenment is ordinary. Absolutely not. It is extraordinary. The ordinary is simply cultivating a quietude of mind, a mindful presence that is closer in than we realize. I don't know how ordinary it's extraordinary for us to really abide in that state for any length of time. And it's even more extraordinary when we reap the benefits of creativity and inspiration and wonderment and um, exploring also what we're capable of when the mind is quiet and our potential just opens up, the capacity to love. There is so much terrain there that is so beautiful and so sacred. And so to think that it's ordinary, I think kind of misses the boat a little bit. I'm not trying to criticize anyone about this. It's just my experience has been that what Buddhism calls the luminous empty mind, there's two qualities of emptiness, which again isn't nothingness, but it's profound, expanded openness. It's an absence of the clinging and of the forms that shape our beliefs and our stories, but it's just complete openness and pristine clarity that is called luminosity, sharpness of mind, a vividness of knowing that isn't based on the brain, but it's based in insight, in intuitive insight, discernment, wisdom. So these two qualities mean there is something much, much, much more vast and deep than simply knowledge. And it exists and arises from the heart as well. bodhicitta, this s- mind of awakening, or what is perhaps more aptly called the spirit of awakening, the spirit of compassionate awakening, um, has these qualities too. It is boundless, it is luminous, it is deeply caring, and it is bright. So, um, allowing Maha Shunya, or sort of the great, deep, and expanded openness of our nature, which is so very, very, very subtle, which is why we miss it often in favor of all the din, all the noise, all the outward directed experiences of mind. But when this is why quieting the mind is important, relaxing the body, letting mind settle, arising the stillness, and within the stillness, the things that we know begin to take on a different flavor. That which arises is more expansive, and there is more to experience than just what is known. But the unknown takes on a different form too. It actually takes on the form of wonder and awe and even beauty. So, this is the good news, right? Whatever kind of weekend we're having, it doesn't mean we're happy. We may be miserable this weekend. That's okay. But this too is there. Chances are, if we are miserable right in this moment, our mind is not in the present. We can't hear the message because it's in the future or in the past in some way. So, relinquishing the need to be anywhere else but here is also a way to begin. Recognizing impermanence of all things that arise and feeling freedom in that, not loss. And then quieting the mind, allowing that realization that we're part of this much, much larger process that not only uh, connects all of us, but supports us in our lives in ways we may not realize. We are being supported no matter how bad it is. And whatever is bad, that too is impermanent. So, so if you're feeling dull this weekend, despite the beautiful weather, if you're here in New England, I hope this helps to turn that lens outward a little bit more, not feel so small in life, but really let your heart be free. Let your power, quote unquote, your personal power be free too. Let it just emanate out from the center of who you are, through all the tears, through the sorrow, through the grief, through the traumas, through the histories, through the worries. We don't have to do anything with those things. We're not trying to get rid of it, but we're wanting simply to acknowledge and recognize this personal sense of power. And by power here, I mean energy that is in motion, the power to be awake, the power of our heart, the power to heal is right there. So, even the sirens are impermanent.